All right, great. Then we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for attending our webinar today. So this is a part of our summer prevention webinar series. Kelly and I have put this together. I'm Jessie Corcoran. I'm the prevention coordinator at WCASA, and Kelly Molitke is our director of prevention here at WCASA. We did plan this webinar series for the summer because we know that prevention educators are very busy throughout the school year. So we wanted to make sure we got this opportunity for you in the summer to have some continuing education opportunities. So please, if you have any feedback about this series or ideas for future topics, please do feel free to email me. There we go. All right. So last week we had a webinar about adapting curriculum for LGBTQ inclusivity from Katie Abbott and Mark Silva of Diverse and Resilient. That was recorded and it will be archived and available on our website soon. Today we have Mark Perry, and I'm not going to speak too much about him so I can let him introduce himself, but he's going to be talking about working around the gatekeepers, unorthodox approaches to community engagement. Just a reminder, next week on Tuesday, July 26th at 10 a.m., we have Moving Pictures, using narrative film and television in sexual violence prevention. Amanda and Blythe from the Family Support Center will be providing that webinar. And then our final webinar in this series will be on Thursday, August 4th at 10 a.m. And it's going to be talking about involving teens in prevention work, educating, engaging, and empowering youth leaders. We have Amy and Erica from the Wisconsin Alliance for Women's Health presenting on that. So we are really, really excited for all of these webinars, and we hope that they're going to be helpful to you. So again, if you do have any questions or any feedback, again, please do give that to me. Really quickly, just a note about our GoToWebinar technology. Please note that there is a questions tab in the sort of right-hand side. Usually it pops up on your right-hand side. There's a questions tab, and you can open that up and ask us questions at any point throughout the webinar. If you have any questions for Mark, he is happy to pause and chat with you for a minute and figure out if he can answer that question for you. And there is, he said, plenty of time at the end, we think, for you to ask even more questions as well. So please do feel free to be using that feature. All right, is that all we have? All right, great. Then we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll turn it over to Mark.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mark Perry, Director of Community Programs with Community Action, Inc. First, I wanted to give you just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Beloit, Wisconsin. Was born and raised there. Went to school at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Made my parents really happy by double majoring in political science and media journalism. They were like, "Yay, you're going to be wealthy." While I was in school, I started working with an organization called Camp Heartland, which is now One Heartland, which is an organization that provides camping programs and other services for children with HIV. Started doing that in college, and then got hooked on the youth development bug, and working with families, and finished school and have done nothing related to my degrees for the past 30 years. I've worked in youth and family programs in Chicago and St. Louis for a number of years, moved back to Wisconsin about 10 years ago, and when I was offered a position at Community Action, Inc. Our Community Action Agency covers both Rock and Walworth Counties. My particular responsibilities, I oversee several of our housing programs, including our homeless shelter, our child care facility, our reproductive health center, and several of our youth programs, community and school-based youth programs. The catalyst for our community engagement work, and what I'll be talking a lot about today, was 5 years ago when we were awarded a Personal Responsibility Education Program, or PREP grant, which prompted us to do reproductive health education and healthy choices education in the community, targeting specifically youth ages 11 to 19. Our first inclination was, oh, let's just partner with the school, because we can go into the schools and we can get all the kids and hit all of our numbers, and it'll be really easy. The grantees that were in Milwaukee and our grantee in Racine that received the PREP grant were able to have school access. As it turned out, our school board and our school district in Beloit decided that they were not going to allow us to have access to the school. So, little climate background, as it says, in 2004, our school board in their infinite wisdom, removed human growth and development curriculum from school instruction altogether. That remained the case from 2004 to 2012. So within that process, too, outside groups weren't allowed to come into the schools and do presentations either around sexual health or reproductive health, or any topic involving sexual activity, including, educating youth about sexual assault, healthy relationships, dating violence. So our STI transmission rates and teen pregnancy rates in Beloit, which were already high, started to increase. Our school district, with some push from Department of Public Instruction, yay, DPI, started engaging our school about reinstituting human growth and development curriculum in school. So at about that time, in 2012, we were awarded our PrEP grant. The first year of our PrEP grant, because we had no school access, but we still had to hit our numbers, we had to get really creative. So we started this public campaign to do education, which I'll talk a lot more about, to get in touch with media, to reach teachers, to reach parents, to reach students, churches, community centers, out on the streets, bars, restaurants, wherever else we could. So we'll get into more of that. The school district eventually did allow us to come into the school, but will not, still to this day, 5 years later, does not allow us to do our evidence-based curricula that's associated with PrEP with full fidelity. We can't bring condoms into school. We can't do demonstrations. We can show PowerPoint pictures of things, and there's several things we can't talk about. So as you see, in 2012, the STI rate for Beloit was one of the 3 highest in Wisconsin. It's actually still true. The same is true about our teen pregnancy rate, still one of the highest in the state. And then in our case, both the STI rate and teen pregnancy rates disproportionately impact African Americans, which were part of our target audience, African Americans and Latinos. So, the first thing we did is we started working with our county health department. The county health department helped us form a coalition of educators, community people, stakeholders to start talking about the issues, especially the issue of sexually transmitted infections throughout our county. Beloit in particular was a target area because of the high rates, but as a county, Rock County has the 4th highest STI transmission rate out of the 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin. So it really was, and still is, a county-wide issue. The health department, with some assistance from I think the University of Wisconsin-Madison, actually adopted this community readiness model, bringing stakeholders together, trying to do surveys to assess where the community was in terms of knowledge and acceptance in terms of education and understanding. So where we ended up after we did this survey with community leaders and stakeholders is our stage of readiness was a 2, which meant we were at the level of denial and resistance, which meant, yeah, that was really awesome. So essentially what it meant for us is our community, wasn't really aware that STIs were an issue, or we were aware on some level, really in denial that it was a problem, that it only affected certain populations or certain groups. There was still there's a lot of the stigma about who contracts STIs and a lot of misinformation, and heavy resistance to doing any sort of education, especially with youth. We have a very conservative, Beloit's a relatively conservative community, and there's a faith-based faction of our community that is very vocal about this education not taking place at all in schools. So that was part of our battle. So that gives you a little bit about our backdrop of where we started. So PrEP, just to give you some more information about what PrEP is. So we were awarded a PrEP grant. There were 6 grantees identified in the state of Wisconsin, or 6 grants made available in the state of Wisconsin. 4 grants in the city of Milwaukee, 1 grant in Beloit, and 1 grant in Racine. So we were awarded the grant in Racine. As you can see, PrEP was The goal of PrEP is to reduce the teen birth rate, reduce the number of sexually transmitted infections, delay initiation into sexual activity. We also had some other quality of life or some other adult preparation targets, like addressing the dropout rate, so exposing kids to continuing education, and also exposing youth to financial literacy. You see our target population, African American Latino youth ages 10 to 19. For our program, and it became true about all of the services, any youth in that age range and that wanted to engage in the curriculum or the education, we allowed in. We didn't segregate, we didn't discriminate and say, no, if you were white or Asian or you couldn't come in. It just, so all students were allowed in. Just our target numbers were counting African American Latino youth. So we started on the journey of doing our PrEP program. So there you're going to see a little bit more about the focus. And this became really critical as we were having conversations with parents, making sure parents understood that this was not about promoting sex, because that was a huge claim that we were promoting sex and encouraging kids to engage in sexual activity. As the data shows from the work that we've done in the first 5 years, kids who've gone through the program are more likely to delay sexual activity because they have more knowledge and understand. So we utilized initially this conversation about making sure people understood that we were not promoting sex at all. We were promoting education so that youth could make informed choices and be able to advocate for themselves and have honest and open dialogue with their parents. So, how did we get the kids? We first started engaging with existing youth service programs, Boys and Girls Club in our community, after-school programming at churches, our YMCA approaching kids there, approaching Head Start, and then also the programs within our youth programs within our existing agency. All the youth enrolled in our programs, our Fresh Start program, which is a youth build program, our Workforce Investment Act program. We have a mentoring program as well. And at one point we actually had a teen parent program. So all the youth in our internal programs all at some point go through all of the PrEP curriculum. We then recruited facilitators from partner agencies to train them as well, so we could go out in the community and have enough enough facilitators trained in the evidence-based curricula to deliver. We did a lot of stuff out on the street too, and I mean literally like hanging out on the street, like handing out flyers, handing out brochures, handing out information, just talking to kids and parents, going to as many community fairs and community festivals as possible to get as much information out. And then we started a really focused effort of engaging the school district at multiple levels. So school board, superintendent, school principals, and as it turned out, our biggest and best allies were actually the health educators in all of the schools. When we started working with them, that's when we were able to gain some access because of their support and their push to get us in. Still weren't able and still aren't able to do our curriculum the way it should, but we're able to have some access to recruit the kids to do our other programs after school, summer, spring break, Christmas break, to make sure that we get our numbers and make sure we get as many youth as possible. So one of the things that we wanted to do was instead of just like handing people data sheets or standing up in front of groups and doing dry PowerPoints, one of the strategies was engaging the youth and working on presenting the facts in a different way. We started working with, and you'll hear a lot more about this group, we started working with a group at Beloit College several years ago, a group of students that organized an organization called the Beloit Public Health Initiative, completely student-run and student-driven. The organization initially formed to address the issues of HIV and address the LGBT community in Beloit, but they expanded when we started working with them to address the community overall and with a greater emphasis on youth. One of the students in the college actually came up with an art project that we did with some students in our Fresh Start program, presenting them with some information about STIs, putting it in a collage, and having the kids actually do artwork around and respond to some of this general statistics. So this is one of the sample tiles that the youth did. So we displayed this internally. We displayed that, we got permission to display it at our public library, took a portable version with us as we went to speak to different groups and community centers, so that when we talked to adults, they understood that our kids had a better understanding of what was going on in the community, but didn't have a voice or didn't have an avenue to talk about it or discuss. And we wanted to give them an opportunity to express themselves, so that they could speak to adults in the community without it being confrontational. So artwork would first seem to be the best way to do that.
We have a question. Can I interrupt you for
Sure.
a question? Okay. How exactly did you approach school administrators?
Initially, we set up appointments with school principals to talk to them about PrEP, introduce them to it. We actually gave them copies of our evidence-based curricula so they could review beforehand and talk to them about it. And then the other thing we did is we presented them with our health department staff. So this is really impacting our community. It's really impacting our youth. This is education we know needs to be done. And anecdotally, our school administrators knew that there was some sort of an issue. They didn't know the numbers, though. So when we started presenting the numbers, administrators were really on board with trying to help us push. But it really was about presenting as much of the facts as possible.
Great.
So. So as I said, we started this community-based service delivery model, getting in contact with our community centers, our churches, our school groups, and our internal groups to pull kids in to start doing the education that way. What it eventually ended up doing was creating this army of kids that were PrEP trained and educated, who were spreading the word to their friends and then eventually talking to their parents about it. So. We also did a push with traditional and social media, doing regular press releases with STI and pregnancy statistics, trying to get on hounding the newspapers to cover stories, to talk to us about it, using public service announcements and doing local radio ads, trying to get on local radio shows to talk about the issue and raise with STI statistics and encouraging people to get tested. That's supposed to say billboards. We actually, with our reproductive health center, we started, because for years with the health center, First Choice Health Center, we had issues with, occasionally we'd have issues with protesters. We'd have the stigma of, oh, you perform abortions and all these other rumors and things that went around, which we don't. We're the clinic's a Title X clinic, but never has performed abortion. But the clinic for years tried to stay under the radar and not draw attention. But we decided that that was not the approach. We needed to be as public as possible because we weren't doing anything wrong. We were providing a vital service to the community. People need access to pregnancy testing. People need access to STI testing. People need pap smears. People need testing for, we were doing cancer screens. So there's a lot of things that we were providing, and we were providing the services to low to moderate income men and women who at the time didn't have any health insurance. So we started to be more public and putting billboards all over the community, touting the services and promoting our health center. Then we started doing, then we got, as time went on, we started engaging in social media, getting information out on Facebook about our clinic and about our services and about PrEP, setting up our Twitter account with the agency and getting information out that way, Snapchat and Instagram. We started putting out memes, which became really fun. I'll actually show you a couple samples of memes that we've done. We also started utilizing a texting service. So as our youth were going through the PrEP program, we'd get their phone numbers, and we'd text them information about community events that were coming up, like if we were doing community fairs or festivals, or we do a huge event every year for World AIDS Day. We do a teen pregnancy prevention event. So any things that we were doing or we were going to be at their school touting something else, we'd always text our youth to let them know. And then parents started adding parents there as well. And then being more visible with what we were doing on our agency website, having a really focused conversation with our board about the importance of this work and why we need to be more visible, and getting them to be on board with it. So,
question, if we can pause right
sure.
there, because it's about social media. What did you share on Snapchat and Instagram? Did you share the memes this way or something else?
We would share the memes on Snapchat and Instagram and also on Facebook. We would also share just statistics, like we put up the statistic of the day or statistic of the week, something for people to focus on. We'd advertise the clinic, you know, come in, get tested. And then we started doing, we actually with the clinic at one point started doing specialty clinics, where we do specialty free testing clinics. With the National Get Yourself Tested campaign, and would advertise those as well. So here's a couple of the more interesting memes that we had up at one point. So you can see the female condom. So we put that, so it's one of my favorites. So, and then this one. So promoting the use of condoms. So condom use and condom purchases has gone down in the United States the past few years. So really promoting the use of condoms as an important component of preventing sexually transmitted infections. As the use of birth control continues to rise, especially the use of longer-term birth control, there's still a part of the community that believe that if I'm on birth control, I'm also protected from sexually transmitted infections. So that's part of the education that we have to do, that condoms are the only form of birth control that protect you from both STIs and unintended pregnancy. So doing a lot of push around condom education.
Another question about the memes. Did you create all of them, or did the youth help create some of them?
The youth actually helped create some. But most of it came from me or from our marketing director, our manager, who's pretty creative. But a lot of the sexual health things I would come up with. We'd also exchange memes with our fellow grantees in Milwaukee and Racine. So somebody would come up with something neat, and we'd all copy it and use it as well. So it was good to have the rest of that group engaging in this to feed off of each other. What are you guys doing that's fun? What are you doing that's creative? What are you doing? So. Parent education. So as PrEP started to gain a foothold with the kids and the community, parents began asking us if there was something for parents. So Street Smart is one of the two sexual health evidence-based curriculums we utilize. So we literally had parents going, where's the Street Smart for adults? So we started doing these parent education forums. We would bring parents in, do different topics, and sometimes we bring parents in and actually do a session with them from one of the curriculums, so we could walk them through and they could experience the session as their kids were experiencing it. So here's an example of some of the information letter that we give to parents about PrEP. So we make sure that we're very honest and upfront about exactly what parents are learning. They said we want to be confident you're aware of what your children are learning during this program, so that there is no question, no concern, or no issue, because again, working in a community like Beloit, where sexual health or even the discussion of sex has still a significant stigma, we wanted to make sure parents knew exactly what we were talking about, so there were no concerns raised later on. So here's an example of a forum that we actually just did recently. How to talk to your teen about sex, and we've actually done this series. I think we've done at least one of these, how to talk to your teens about sex, every year for the past like 3 years or so. We bring parents in, we feed them dinner, provide child care, which is always a big deal for our parents, so they can have conversations, and their teens, we even have them engaged in another room, so it's just us with just parents in the space talking honestly about it. We'll go about this in different ways. This one was, we actually presented some facts about safe sex practices, myths about sex. We actually put together a quiz on sexual health and had on STIs and sexual health, and had the parents take the quiz to see what their knowledge base was, and then went back with them and worked through with them to fill in the actual information. It was really eye-opening as we started doing this project to find out that not only were kids getting misinformation from their peers and from the internet, but quite often they were getting a lot of misinformation from their parents as well, either because parents were uncomfortable or just didn't have the knowledge. So it became critically important to do more education with parents as well.
Another question,
yeah.
Related. Did the letter go out in like kids' backpacks from school or through mass mailing, or what was the mechanism to get the parent information out?
So the letters we would hand out, we'd hand out the application forms in class, because we eventually got to the place in school where they would let us recruit for our after-school, spring break, and summer programming while we're in school. So we'd hand out the letter along with an intake packet to the kids in the classrooms and the health classes that we were working with. And then we would advertise on our website and on Facebook and everything that they were available. We hand them out when we go to church meetings to talk to parent groups there, so that we got the information out, so that we made sure that any child that was going to sign up or be registered for the program the parent got that information. We even do follow-up phone calls to just ensure that parents understand when we get applications back. We don't want to have any issue.
Okay.
So.
And then one more logistical question. In terms of not requesting an RSVP, how did you know, how did you plan for food and child care when you didn't know who was coming?
It was pretty hit or miss. There were a couple meetings where, we planned for 30 parents and we had 4 parents show up. But as it gained footing, it was pretty consistent that we'd have somewhere between 25 and 30 parents. So there were a couple times where, we were eating a lot of pizza, or somebody ate a lot of salad, or we had a bunch of tacos left over. And we left it open for parents that way. Sometimes it's smarter to do the RSVP dynamic and try to call and get engaged. But we wanted to leave it open for those parents who, if they wanted to come at the last minute and they did an RSVP, they didn't feel like they couldn't come. So, yeah, there were times where we not sacrificed because the food got eaten eventually, yeah. But, we had low turnout. For the most part now, though, 5 years in, whenever we do these parent forums, because we try to time them right around the time that we're doing programming. So when we're signing up for after-school programming in the fall, right before we do our Christmas break program, 2 weeks before we do our spring break camp, a couple of weeks before we do our summer program, or a week or so, actually that was a week before our summer program started, so that as parents come in, they're getting information about the program that their kids are signing up for, and then the general education. It also gives us a chance to, for our spring break and summer programs, we do field trips, we do other things, so we invite parents to come along on those things and chaperone. It's all open. Parents are welcome to come into session and see what's going on and check in with their kids. So, the two big things, it's the food and the child care. Because we have those consistently, when we started doing those things, the food dinner we were always doing. But honestly, the child care thing makes a really big difference. Parents feel a lot more comfortable being in that space, having that conversation when they know that they have child care, their kids are in that space and they're taken care of and being fed. So we would have staff and volunteers that would come in and do child care for us.
Great, thank you.
Let's see. This is a project that we just actually did, or a parent forum that we just did with our sexual assault recovery program in Beloit. So we work pretty closely with them. We started working with them a couple of years ago to do parent education around sexual assault awareness, because it's as you all know, one of those things that we don't talk about as much as we should, don't address as much as we should, and parents and youth both need the education. So really starting to work with SARP, which is our group, really gave us just another substantive dialogue to engage in that's so related, especially when you're talking about sexual health and you're talking about kids making decisions about whether or not to engage in sex. Having to talk about teen dating violence and talking about healthy relationships goes hand in hand with that. So, and instead of us trying to do that, although we do some, we use a couple of different evidence-based curriculum in our program. We use safe dates and love notes to have those conversations with youth. But the ability to have folks from our sexual assault recovery program and come into our after-school programs, our spring break and our summer programs, and talk to the youth more directly, so that our youth have know the organization they can go to, and also have faces, friendly faces that they can connect with in case they have the issue, has been really important as well. So, our Beloit College partnership, it's turned out, as it says, our most important and influential partner. We started working with Beloit College several years ago through their liberal arts and practice program. We would provide internship for the opportunities for our various programs and services, so that students on campus could have that hands-on experience working in the community. It also helped address, historically Beloit College and the city of Beloit have had kind of this adversarial relationship. It's kind of, Beloit College was kind of the city on the hill for years. It was very separate from the rest of the community. And the college has made a concerted effort over the past several years to break that stigma and do more outreach in the community, and also invite more people onto campus. So we've been working with them for the past several years to get interns out into the community with our agency and with our partner agencies, engaging with faculty to do different projects, bringing students and parents onto campus for campus tours and during programs, having community leaders and people in human services coming onto campus to talk to students about their, to do guest lecturing, to talk to students about what it looks like on the ground, and then doing several joint sponsors events with the college. So, yeah, I would advise if you have a college or university or technical college in your area, I would advise you strongly to try to build partnerships and relationships with them. One, especially in this case, because you have that they fit that population of 15 to 24-year-olds who are most at risk for sexually transmitted infection, who also have that issue with dating violence and sexual assault. So you're engaging one of the populations that are most at risk. Also, it gives you another set of allies and people on the ground to do work, both at the faculty level and at the student level. And they're just really good partners. One of the newest, the most recent relationship or connection with the campus that we've established is working closely with the Beloit College Health and Wellness Center. So last spring, we actually went on the campus and held a couple of clinics on campus, so free testing clinics on campus at their site to make it most accessible for the students. In the past, we had held our GYT clinics at our facilities in Beloit and Janesville. We were getting really good turnout there, but we wanted to see what it would look like if we did a specialized clinic on campus. So, and the two clinics we've done so far have been very successful. I'm actually meeting with the wellness director next week to talk about us having a more permanent presence on campus at the health center, and also going into classrooms talking to students as well. So it's kind of the liberal arts and practice model that was adopted, you know, that idea of as students are in school where they advance. So experimenting those years, cultivating relationships, making connections, and then transferring that work postgraduate into their life experience. So it's kind of the model they follow, and we've adopted it with them, and we fit in the continuum at various parts along the way. The Beloit Public Health Initiative, so I referenced them earlier. This group was founded in 2011 by a student on campus, Ian Hedges. Again, their focus initially was to address, do HIV education and outreach to the LGBTQ community in Beloit. Ian Hedges and I started connecting and engaging, talking about ways that we could support them and they could support PrEP, and we could do a more concerted effort with community engagement, working with the health department and the rest of the members of our coalition. The greatest thing that BPHI gave us were legs on the ground. We had 20 college students who were willing to go out and do flyers and brochures, do pub crawls, get trained to do education do education with our students. Just really solid group of young people. So it's one of the most popular student organizations on the campus now, and they actually screen students and limit the number of students that they take in based on the responsibilities they have in the community. We actually also, Community Action, we secured a grant from the medical college to help us with some financial support to support BPHI and some of their endeavors and some of our joint projects as well. But having the students consistently on campus during the year to do outreach for us, do education for us, to do those pub crawls and things like that for us has made a tremendous impact in the community. There's nothing like having the financial resources are important, but the human resources, having people to go out and do the dialogue, having people who have no fear, who will walk around with the bag of 2,000 condoms and just hand them out to people, has been really critical spreading the word. I mean, I don't know how many condoms over the past 4 or 5 years, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or 50,000 condoms just in the county alone that we've distributed through our pub crawls and GYT clinics. That's us getting ready to go out for one of our pub crawls. You see we have our GYT Tshirts. More about the mission of the Public Health Initiative and its vision. Those are some of the students that I work with. I'm the community, whatever they call me. Basically, I'm the advisor that works with them from the community standpoint. And then I have a counterpart on campus, a health and society professor in the back there, holding up the bag on top. That's Ron Decora. He's a professor at the college, and he's my counterpart as he's a health and society professor, and he works with the students on campus. So we work together to plan things, making sure we're conscious of the students' class schedules and things like that, and making sure they're not overwhelmed, because they can easily put in a significant amount of hours doing work with BPHI. The other thing that we established is every year we name a coordinator for BPHI, a student coordinator. That coordinator is a paid internship through Community Action now. So, let's see. World AIDS Day is one of the events that we established back in our 4th year, back in 2012, and we do that as a collaboration with BPHI. So the students do a lot of the planning and organizing. We hold it on campus. We hold it on campus on purpose to try to draw people from the broader community to come on the campus, but also engage students and faculty. This past year's World AIDS Day, we were fortunate to get one of my dearest friends, Neil Willinson, who was the founder of Camp Heartland, to come and talk about the Camp Heartland, his experience founding it, the stigma that still surrounds HIV, and some of his experiences over the years. So we had a really great crowd come in. World AIDS Day has gained a lot of traction in the community, so people really do turn out, church groups, youth groups, faculty, staff, people from the community. We get a lot of coverage from media as well. We actually had, I think it was 3 television stations cover World AIDS Day this past year. So, and then our GYT campaign, as we were talking about, that's, part of that is our testing clinics and our pub crawls. That's a picture of me with my minions from Beloit College from I think the 2nd year actually. So, we started doing the GYT stuff. I got to give credit where it's due. It's originally, and it's a national campaign. It's based on the It's Your Sex Life campaign that MTV started several years ago, that has grown and expanded and been adopted by the CDC and a lot of other entities promoting testing. So we took our GYT stuff from them, started doing our clinics, and then came up with the weird idea of doing pub crawls. So as you see, GYT Rock County style, cupcakes with condoms in it. So we get some funding from the Department of Health Services, from Healthcare Education and Training, and from the Medical College to do our GYT programming. We do a series of specialty testing clinics that are all free. We'll do 6 or 7 pub crawls during the year. We'll get a bunch of volunteers on a Friday or Saturday night, load them up with GYT Tshirts and safe sex kits that have male condoms, female condoms, lubricant, dental dams, and then information about where people can get tested and services provided by First Choice, and also instructions on how to properly use male and female condoms as well. And then we'll hand them out to as many people as possible. We'll go out and we call bars ahead of time, so we have bars that we work with. There are 12 bars in Beloit that welcome us in, that we hit during the night. And then there are 5 bars in Janesville, Wisconsin that welcome us in, that we work with and hand out information. So we split our groups into a Beloit squad and a Janesville squad, and go out usually from about 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night till about midnight, and distribute condoms and information and T-shirts and whatever other tchotchkes we have. You know, our latest thing is we bought GYT earbuds. So they come in a little pouch, and we put condoms in the pouch with earbuds as well. That's just a photo of us at our health fair. Before every World AIDS Day, we do a community health fair that leads into the program. So we invite all of the health services, like all the hospitals, health service centers, things like that, school district in to do health fair, hand out information, and then we roll all the folks into our World AIDS Day program and presentation. More about our community engagement stuff. Those are 3 young men from my mentoring program who all help and support. In fact, 2 of those young men, the young man in the middle and the young man on the left, are working for me this summer as counselors in training, working with our summer prep program as counselors with our summer camp. So, so we do the education, parent education forums, health screenings, the classroom education that we're allowed to do, and it's limited. We actually get a full week in the school now. We get 5 full days in the classroom, but in terms of what we can cover, we're still fairly limited. So the teachers are really great at promoting. If you want to know more, if you want to learn more, sign up for spring break camp, sign up for summer camp, sign up for this. But we go into the schools as the health classes rotate 4 times a year, so October, January, March, and May. And we're in all 4 of the middle schools in the school district of Beloit that we're able to go in and do classes for all of the 8th grade. So during the course of the year, we also do our other school district, Turner, and then we do our outlying communities, Edgerton, Evansville, and Milton, going into their middle schools and high schools, doing some education as well. In addition to the 160 or 180 or so kids that go through the full prep program and get all of the curriculum, we hit another 1,500 kids in the county with the partial education over the course of each year. So, our pub crawls. There's another example. As you can see, I'm big on the T-shirt thing, so there's probably we have probably like 10 different GYT T-shirts now. But you know, I knew that we had made it about 6 months ago when a pastor from one of the churches in Beloit scolded me because he said, I'm standing up and I'm doing my sermon, and I look on the back row, and there's like 10 of your high school kids wearing your GYT T-shirts to church. So, and the kids wear them, people wear them. What's really cool is our agency as a whole has really embraced prep and really embraced the GYT dynamic. Whenever we have specialty clinics or pub crawls, everybody in our agency wears their GYT T-shirts on those days. They wear them on other times. People in the community ask them about them. Even our finance department, like our accountants, they get a kick out of wearing their GYT T-shirts and having people in the community ask them about them. So it's really become an agency-wide push, and that's been a huge growth, because when we first started doing this, even within the agency, there were people who didn't want to talk about it or touch it, and now it's pretty common conversation for me to go talk to my fiscal manager about purchasing 4,000 glow-in-the-dark condoms. So, yeah, the first year when we started prep, when we had to order like our educational materials, I had to call our IT people and let our executive director know that I'm going on this website to purchase demonstrators and condoms. Please don't flag me and fire me. But now it's pretty commonplace. So there's some advertising from one of our specialty clinics. I think was that. Oh yeah, I think that was the clinic. We had 75 people turn out for that testing clinic. We were only able to get through 60 of them. It says 47. medical staff were in the building till about 10 o'clock that night trying to get people through testing, and then made appointments with the other people. But it's grown significantly. Our first clinic, I think we tested 13 people. We've grown, like I said, pretty significantly. So, and then our pub crawls, as I said, we've handed out over the time about 40,000 condoms since we started doing the campaign. And then the free testing, about 300 people getting free testing over the time period. The work that we still need to do. So the cool thing about PrEP and the work we've been doing is since its inception, the teen pregnancy rate in Beloit has decreased by 22%. Unfortunately, the STI rate has gone up. So in 2016, we were awarded a continuation grant. So PrEP was originally a 5-year grant cycle. And we weren't sure after that first 5 years if we were going to get funding to continue. Fortunately, because of all the advances and the progress in the work and the data that's come out of the work that we've done, PrEP was refunded nationally. And so Beloit was fortunate enough to be one of the continuing grantees. So we'll continue PrEP on for the next 5 years. Still the focus, STI prevention education, promotion of condom use, testing, and treatment. So here's some local data about why it matters, and we present this to, like I said, this is the data that I use when I go talk to teachers and administrators, church leaders, and anybody else in the community. So this is our 2015 data. And our health department has been really cooperative with getting us information and accurate information broken down by race and by community. So I can tell people how many STIs were, how many chlamydia cases there were in Edgerton or Evansville or Milton or Madison or Beloit, not Madison because it's Dane, but any community in Rock County, I can tell you what your data is locally. So that's been really helpful. So as you can see, our STI rates are still significant. Janesville and Beloit being the two largest communities make up the majority of our STI cases. As is the case nationally, African Americans are disproportionately affected by sexually transmitted infections. So part of our push with the campaigns and things we're doing now publicly is focusing on engaging the African American community to get them coming and get tested. It's actually interesting. Yesterday, because we posted some ads on Facebook specifically targeting the African American community. Our marketing coordinator called me because we had like 15,000 people had viewed the ads, but we actually had a troll yesterday, which was really fun. So I was on the phone with our marketing person as the troll was going through stuff, and I was feeding her information to post on Facebook, and it got really interesting. So
what was the troll doing?
The troll was like, "Why are you focusing on African Americans?" And I'm like, and so I went back with African Americans are disproportionately infected by HIV or by STI. He's like, well, that's not fair. You're doing this and that, and I was like, I'm trying to raise awareness. And I'm like, and so eventually we posted, if you would be interested in having a more specific conversation about the global effect of STIs on people of persons of African descent, and we put, please contact me. So. And then the guy put up something about you must be white, that's why you're targeting, that's why you're saying this. And then my development director put up a picture of me so that the guy knew. So that was a really interesting thing. And then I think this may be the last slide. So this is, again, where the issue becomes about Beloit. 23% of the overall county population, 51.4% of the chlamydia cases, 72.6% of the gonorrhea cases. And I think that's all. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. I have a few questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, do you have any recommendations? So you mentioned, you referenced a collaboration with your local sexual assault provider, which is SARP. Do you have recommendations? A lot of the people who are joining us are from SARP similar organizations, so a sexual assault service provider. Any recommendations for them about how they connect with someone like you in their community to do some joint efforts in this way?
I would say if you have a large community action agency or a large human service agency or even your county health department, that those would be relationships that you would want to build so that you can start, one, reaching the populations that they serve and start building more of a coalition. That would be one. It's difficult, but I would also say as much as possible to area churches. And then the third place would be any youth-serving entities, so community centers, boys and girls clubs, YMCA, trying to get in touch with them to do programming, and then don't give up on the schools. Try it at all levels. I mean, if you know the health teachers if you know one of the health teachers at your middle school or your high school, start there and help them become an ally to push. But I'd say partnering with the other institutions in your organization that are human service agencies would be the place to start with that and start gaining some traction there. Because everybody, I think you'll find that they're really open to it, because you have services that they want their participants to be able to engage in, and they have services that I'm sure you want your participants to engage in. So there's a mutual benefit to engaging with the human service organizations in your community.
Great, thank you. Another question. So who developed this overall strategy? You have multiple different components going on. Is that something that you just created yourself in your community, or is it adapted from another, organization? Where does that come from?
Honestly, a lot of it came out of my brain. We just, it was one of those things where, because the conversation is not had, because there's so much stigma, people wanted us to be really quiet and go about this really discreetly, and I was like, and honestly, I do have to admit, we borrowed it from, Milwaukee had a very successful pregnancy prevention campaign, and part of the reason why their campaign was really effective is because it was very in your face, and it was open and it was up front, and they didn't worry about the stigma. They didn't worry about trying to hide. So I figured if that could work there, maybe it could work in Rock County, and if it didn't, at least we went down swinging. So, but nobody could say that they didn't hear about us or they didn't know us. So we tried to make ourselves as public as possible. I mean, I think that's the dynamic, is because we're dealing with issues that people don't want to talk about in polite company, and we have to force people to have the conversations.
The reply was "Bravo, brain," just so you know. Bravo to your brain. If you could speak a little bit more to that piece you were just talking about around stigma, because I think that's something that we do have in common around sexual health and sexual assault work. So sort of embracing that, I think what I took from that was you had to embrace that as an organization too, as well as trying to bring it out into the community.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that and how the community has responded to, like, we're not going to hide anymore, this is a sexual health issue, this is impacting our community. If you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, what was really interesting is when we started having this conversation, people were like, well, only certain kinds of people get sexually transmitted infections, and we don't really talk about those people. Or I don't travel in circles with people who would get those diseases. Or even with just the general health conversation overall, those are dialogues that should be had. By parents at home. So when we started talking to parents and got parents and figuring out that parents weren't having those conversations, for one, and two, the few parents that weren't informed enough to have a legitimate conversation, we started utilizing that as well to get the word out. But we started with everybody just being very public about the facts. 20 million people every year in the United States get a sexually transmitted infection. That's a lot. It's a lot. 40% of sexually active teenagers have a sexually transmitted infection. That number is huge. We started showing people the data locally and nationally, and they were like, oh, it's not just these certain kinds of people. And talking to people about anybody can get an STI. Getting people to really understand that was the biggest thing. Anybody can get a sexually transmitted infection. Getting adults to understand that, and then with the pregnancy piece, talking to youth about them understanding that even the first time that you engage in sexual activity, if you engage in sexual activity unprotected, you can get pregnant. Oh, you can? Yeah. Talking to them about STIs. You get an STI from oral, anal, and vaginal sex. You can get an STI from oral sex? Yes, you can. You know an STI from anal sex? Yes, you can. So really being public about the myths and the facts, I think that was one of the biggest dynamics. Also, getting people to understand that STIs, even though 15 to 24-year-olds account for 49% of all the STIs in the country every year, the group with the fastest growing rate of sexually transmitted infection are adults 50 and older. So when we started doing that, people were like, what? We started that's when other people in the community were like, that can't be true. I'm like, it is absolutely true. It's 100% true. And then you started hearing about cases of like, you know, senior living places where STI outbreaks were popping up, and they were like, oh, it's in the news. Yeah, we're not making this stuff up, baby. It's really actually happening. So pushing the statistics and really talking about the myths and kind of breaking that dynamic that only certain people get, like, you know, I mean, our conversation about sexual assault in this country is so skewed because we still do a lot of victim shaming and victim blaming. So really promoting and getting people to understand what those dynamics are around dating violence and sexual assault, and breaking that stigma and really challenging that so that people understand, you know, I shouldn't have to worry about what I wear. I should be able to wear what I want. I should be able to do what I want. And you know, one of our prep participants in Milwaukee had a shirt last week when we were in Wausau, and the shirt was "Only yes means yes." And so she's got her youth in Milwaukee wearing it, so that's something I'm going to steal, so our kids are wearing it. But really being public about that. Only yes means yes. That's the absolute truth. And people understanding what consent really is and talking about that and educating. Because most of us don't really, most lay people are like, well, I think I know what consent means, but they really don't. So assuming that you run this where you assume people know more than they actually do, and we did that at first with this work. And we found out, yeah, people don't really know that much. So as much education as you can do as possible and getting out there with the facts is really critical. Because like I said, we assume that people know more than they do. And quite honestly, with these subjects, because we don't talk about them because of the stigma, most people are horribly uneducated about it.
Great. Other questions?
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
So, Mark, you mentioned, I think a few different times, you know, the first time we had this event, there was only a few people there or something like that. Having myself been a prevention educator, oftentimes if that happens to me, I end up having this feeling like, oh, I did something wrong. Oh, I need to change this event entirely if not that many people came. And so I'm wondering if, you know, when that happened, did you have this experience of, oh, we need to change something, or did you think to yourself, we just need to keep doing it?
Our thought was we just need to keep doing it, and we got to get out more. It was more bodies on the ground, more flyers, more public, more advertising. Earlier, if we plan an event in December, like our World AIDS Day event, we'll start promoting that in early October. We'll start planning it in August. So it's really just, it was more. We're like, this is, in theory, this is really sound. We know that, because parents say to us that they want the education, parents want to engage, so we just got to promote and promote and promote and promote, and as heavily as possible. Because I think that's one of the issues, too, is we try something once and it doesn't go over as well, so then we don't do it again. You got to give stuff mileage and give it a little time, you know. And if after 3 times, like the GYT clinics, like I said, the first time we didn't have very many people, but that's completely changed now. Our pub crawls, the first time we went out, people were like, what? And now we have people who, like, we'll go into a bar, we'll give out T-shirts and packets, and they'll follow us to other bars and, like, help us. These people are doing this. So it's just, you got to build the momentum, so you can't give up. You got to keep pushing, and it can get really frustrating. Not being able to get into school with prep the first year, and it's still on some level frustrating because it's still a big grind for us to get our numbers and push, but it's become easier because we know how to get our numbers. We know where to push. But it's, you know, I'd love to be able to just go into the schools and do our curriculum with full fidelity because that's what we need. But I know if we go into the schools and present something, I'm going to get 40 kids to sign up for my spring break program. I'm going to get 50 kids to sign up for summer camp. You know, it's just going to happen. So you keep pushing and plugging.
Another question specifically related to some of the faith-based work that you're doing. I think that they're in the sexual assault field as well. That's not maybe the first partner that comes to your head, and I would think that would be the same for around sexual health topics.
Oh, yeah.
So if you could talk a little bit about what that work has looked like and maybe some of the successes and challenges with that.
It's been really interesting approaching pastors, or when we started approaching pastors in the community, especially those that we know, churches that we know have existing youth groups or youth programs, and sitting down and having that first conversation. But honestly, it's kind of the same approach as everybody else. We present the facts. We talk to them about what's going on in the community. We ask them about what their view of sexual health is, what they think the dynamic is, try to get some information from them. But and that, you know, most pastors are pretty reasonable people. You do have some folks who are staunchly against it no matter what I say. They're just not going to hear the data. So we run into those too, but honestly, going in and sitting down with them and listening and presenting the information has gotten us some pretty significant support from especially pastors in our African American community. We have a couple of churches that we work with very regularly. In fact, my summer camp is one of the churches, about almost half the kids are from one church youth group. So, but really being direct and honest with them as well, you just have to call and say, hey, can I come and talk to you about this issue? Because it impacts the community, and you're a community leader, you know, would you be willing to sit down one-on-one with me? You might not let me come and talk to your church congregation, although some pastors will let me do that too. So, but you can't be afraid to make the phone call. You can't assume that they're not going to talk to you. You have to get in. And if you a couple of them say no, you call a few more. But you keep it's the plug, it's the grind. You can't get frustrated because somebody's going to talk to you. So.
Other questions? We'll give it a second here. I'm monitoring the questions. Any questions from in the room here from folks?
I do have a thought. As you were talking about pub crawls, I once saw a pub crawl happening where folks were handing out condoms, and on the condoms they had put a sticker on the condom that said "Ask First." So I think that was a really cool way of showing that, you know, safer sex. I think most people, if they think about safer sex, they think about condoms and they think about birth control. But beyond that, what if, you know, we started conflating the two and saying, you know what, part of safer sex is also getting consent ahead of time, right? So I saw that done. I'm just going to throw that out there to any sexual assault program that is interested in running with it. But yeah, I thought that was a really cool way of putting those two things together.
It's good that you brought that up. That's part of the education that we do with our youth as we talk to them about having the conversation with their partner about whether or not they're ready to engage in sex. The thing that we say to them is that if you can't have a conversation about it, you're not ready to do it. So having that conversation, knowing your partner's sexual history, being honest and open about that, talking to your partner about your sexual history and knowing theirs. Both of you, if you agree that you're ready to engage in sexual activity, that you make that decision to get tested, know each other's status as well. And we always say make sure you actually see the paper. Don't just take your partner's word for it. And then, you know, talking about what form of birth control you're going to use. And we always promote in there somewhere along the way having a conversation with a trusted adult. If it's not your parent or guardian, it's with a health professional or one of our educators or with your health teacher so that you can really talk to them and make sure you're ready. Because we're talking about you should be able to have this conversation with not just your partner but with adults as well if you're thinking about that you're ready. But it starts with us making a consensual decision that we are ready. And, you know, talking to them about respecting, if your partner is pushing you or forcing you or, you know, is browbeating you about engaging in sexual activity and you're not ready, that's not the partner for you. So you need to move on and find another partner. So we have that very honest conversation all throughout the education. No, nobody's responsible for your sexual health but you. And if there are issues, if something happens like an STI or an unintended pregnancy, you're the person responsible for that dynamic. Don't put your sexual health in somebody else's hands, especially with young ladies. We talk about it's okay. You absolutely should carry condoms around. You know that you absolutely need to make that decision for your partner. And if your partner's not ready if you're not ready or you don't want to, even if you've had sex with them before and you decide you don't want to have sex with them that night, that's no. Just because you've had sex with them before does not create a contract that you now have to have sex with me as long as we're dating. You have the right to say no anytime. So getting them to understand that. It's been really eye-opening for me doing this work, talking to young people about how much of that as well that they don't understand. It's your body is your right. You don't have to you don't have to give in. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do sexually or otherwise. And that idea that you can actually let go if your partners aren't right for you, you can actually move on. You know, especially with the dating violence dynamic. Some of the bullying that goes on through text messaging and things like that. You know, if your partner is engaging in those kinds of things, that's unhealthy. That's not a good relationship. Get out of it.
Could you talk a little bit more about how you got parental involvement? I know you said you did the food and the daycare and things like that, but just to get them to even recognize that this was an issue. Obviously, people don't know what they don't know. so to even get them to come in, kind of as an acknowledgement that there's these issues they don't know. How did you solve that?
We still do. We actually incentivize the kids to go home and start the conversation with their parents and get their parents to call us. So if you go home and you do this STI quiz with your parents and your parent signs off on it and calls me, I'll give you a $20 gift card. So we were doing, or $10 gift card, or I'll give you this. So we were actually incentivized, and we still do it to this day. We incentivize the kids to go home and engage, and we do it with our school programs too. So even though we can't do the full program, you know, if you guys just took the quiz, take the quiz home, do it with your parents at the dinner table. The quizzes and the things that we use are a way for them to engage in the conversation initially without it specifically being about them. Oh, we took this quiz in class, Mom, and the teacher said if you take this quiz, we can do this. So then they start doing the quiz, and they're like, oh, that's a quiz about sex. But yeah, we actually started incentivizing the kids to engage with their parents and then getting the parents to call us as part of the incentive. And that really has worked. So, and you know, honestly, it's interesting how many parents, once they receive that letter, call to, you know, what are you teaching? Are you sure, my kid? Is this on the up and up? It's absolutely on the up and up, man. Yeah, we're not some fly. They're like, I know your community action, but I didn't know you guys did this. Yeah, we do this too. Okay. But yeah, we incentivize our kids to engage with their parents, which gets their parents to talk to us.
And then if you want to, along those lines too, you talked about being really upfront, like not hiding not hiding the ball on anything. Like in that letter and in your conversations, you're telling them exactly what you're doing.
Oh yeah, you have to. Parents, I mean, we need to be honest about if I can't have an honest conversation about this work with our parents, then I shouldn't be doing this. If I'm trying to hide what we're doing or sneak people in, you know, we're not doing back alley stuff. You know, we're as upfront as possible because I want parents to challenge other parents to get their kids in. It's interesting how many parents call me now and they're like, so my friend's daughter or my friend's son is enrolled in your camp. Is it still time for me? Can I enroll my son or daughter? So parents go out and talk about it too. Well, and that's really helped a lot.
Great. No other questions getting typed in right now, so.
Nope. Somebody did say that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think in regards to incentivizing the students to talk with their parents. So I don't see any other questions. All right, great. Well, thank you so much again, Mark, for being here today and talking about this. I know, again, one of the most common questions we get here at WCASA is, how do I get into the schools? How do I get into the schools? I'm having trouble getting into the schools. So I think Mark has shown a lot of really great ideas, ways that you can get to students and you can get to youth without using the school. Or, you know, slowly you get this community engagement and then there's pressure from students and parents to bring you into the schools, right? So seems like there's a few people saying, you know, thanks for your energy, thanks for your time today. So yeah, thank you all so much. Just a reminder, our next webinar will be next week on Tuesday, and that's about using film and TV in your prevention work. So any last words from anyone else?
No, just thank you. Right. Thank you again. This is really great. Thanks everyone for joining us, and Mark, this was awesome.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.